Hi Year 9s. Some of my group have asked me to remind them about what a box plot shows. So I'm going to start with this. So here is a box plot, sometimes called a box and whisker plot. They're the same thing. It needs to be readable, it needs to be on a scale with a label on it. So this is allegedly showing the weight of something in grams. It shows us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things from which we can work out 2 more things. What this hasn't shown is how many values are in the sample. That might be elsewhere on it. So what does it show us? First of all, it shows us the lowest value, which in this case on the scale I've given us looks like it might be, if that's 10, that could be about 14, couldn't it? On the exam, we might give you a far easier scale to read. If that's 70, that's close to the middle, isn't it? I'm going to say that's that highest value. I'm going to say reads as 64 this time. I'm not too worried whether you agree or disagree with how I've read it off the scale. On the exam, it'll be less ambiguous. Lowest value, the highest value in the sample. So if we know there's 100 things in the sample, that's the first one, that's the 100th one, if they're all written in order of size. But that also tells us the difference between the biggest and the smallest, the range. So in this case, the range is not 14 to 64. The range is 64 take 14 is 50 grams. Right, so what does the box part tell us? Well, this value tells us the lower quartile. If you had 100 values in your sample, the lower quartile is the 25th value, the value which would be 1/4 of the way in. If you had 100 values in your sample, the upper quartile is the 75th value. If there were 20, the 1st, the 20th, the 5th, the 15th, and so on. So I think that's 30, I'm going to say 33. 33 grams. And that one, 40, 50, 60, I'm going to say that's 54 grams. Lower quartile, upper quartile. Between them, where I'm going to fit this, I'm just going to fit this neatly in here. Between them is another range, but it's between the quartiles. So I'm going to write IQR here. And then here where I've got space, I'm going to write IQR stands for inter, between, quartile, the points in the data which mark 1/4 and 3/4 of the way through, range, a difference in values. 54 take 33, 21 grams. What does that represent? The middle half of the data is within 21 grams of each other. That's that measurement. So that only leaves one more measurement on the diagram, this one here, which is the median, which is one of the 3 averages. The median is, if you line everything up in order, let's say there were 100 values, we're going to say that's bang in the middle, okay? And remember, with the median, let's say there was an even number of values. Let's say there was only 4. Let's say if there were 5 values, it's the 3rd value. If there are only 4, it would be the average of the 2nd and 3rd. If there's 100, might get away talking about the 50th value, okay? The median, bang in the middle, okay? Which in this case I'm going to say is 40, 50, 41 grams. Now some of that detail about reading that and saying whether that's the 50th or between the 50th and 51st, when you're reading one of these, we can say it's the 50th. When you've got the raw data, we can talk a bit more, there's a bit more nuance with that. But to read a box plot, you need to be able to say this. Let's say you were comparing two box plots. Let's say we had a scale and you had a box plot like this and a box plot like this. You might be asked to compare them. You'd be able to say, oh look, this one has a far higher median than this one. Because the median of set A is bigger than the median of set B, on average, set A is bigger in whatever quality than A. But notice the two things I've said. Because the median for A is bigger, therefore on average A is, it could be heavier, it could be longer, it could be ... A comment has a fact and a conclusion for a mark. One without the other doesn't get any marks. What else could you comment on? We could say that, oh, in this case, the ranges are similar. Because the ranges are similar, we see a similar variation in the results. Or you could comment on the biggest values or the smallest values or the interquartile range. You'll only ever be asked for 2 or 3 comments or comparisons, and each one's got to be a fact with a conclusion. Okay? Here are the things we put on a box plot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values from which we can make 2 calculations. And if you've got 2 box plots, we can make, well, quite a few comparisons. Sometimes things will be different. Sometimes things will be the same. Remember, a comparison could include similarities or differences. Oh, perhaps we should say then, if a question asks for 2 differences, you've got to find 2 things which are different. But remember, fact, conclusion. Whether you use that symbol for because, so I've written, see how quickly I descend into writing things, not explaining them. Because, therefore. Okay, and then put it in context. This is about weights, so I might talk about heavier and lighter. It could have been in meters, longer and shorter. It could have been times, couldn't it? Okay then, remember, if there's any more videos you'd like, I might be able to do them.